HeroScape is officially back.
We are back, baby.
So to celebrate, we're gonna do another tier list. Not these guys though. I haven't played the new set enough. I'm gonna do a tier list for the other master set that I haven't done yet, which is the Battle for the Underdark master set for HeroScape. Now this one is the Dungeons and Dragons expansion. So there are only 8 units in the Battle for the Underdark master set. Let's dive into these units and give them their tier assignments. One thing before I get started, if I'm turning a little bit strangely, I kind of hurt my neck / back yesterday, celebrating a little bit too hard at my daughter's birthday. Doesn't mean I can't make a video, right? First unit we have Anna Karithon. Anna Karithon is a cleric. You can see that really wasn't a HeroScape trait until this expansion came out. That's more of a D&D thing. So what she does is attacks undead units very well, and she also helps defend nearby units against Uthgar following units, which are the kind of like the evil ones. She's 100 points. Anna Karithon is a C tier. You see, I don't really find, especially when you're setting up, maps to just play HeroScape, that you're going to be setting up enough scenarios where she takes advantage of her abilities. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of units that follow Uthgar, but for 100 points, I would hope that those abilities were a little bit more widespread. They're overly thematic, in my opinion. Not really representing the clerics too well. It's too bad. The next unit we have is Darrak Ambershard. Darrak Ambershard was a good addition to the dwarves range within HeroScape. Only 60 points. Darrak Ambershard has the sneak attack, which means that if you have an opponent engaged with Darrak Ambershard and another enemy for your opponent, so another one of your units, Darrak Ambershard actually attacks for 2 additional hits, so attacks for 6, which is very strong for a 60-point hero, and honestly, that's not a difficult condition to get going. Darrak Ambershard also has an ability that lets him disarm traps, which, unless you're playing in the role-playing version of HeroScape, you're not probably not going to use that much. He also has a little bit of ability where he can hide in darkness, so that's with the dungeon and shadow spaces. When you're building maps in HeroScape, it takes a while to set the game up because of all the terrain. What's very common is people will try to use all the different terrain types they have. They'll have a map where you have like snow over here, lava over here, maybe a castle up here, water, swamp over there. So if you have a dungeon section, it's going to be like a small, like little corner of the map. So those abilities, I don't really give that much credit to Darrak Ambershard for being able to hide very effectively in darkness. He can still dodge 25% of attacks when he's on regular land, just goes up to 50% when he's in shadow spaces, which is important because he doesn't have a lot of defense. But for 60 points, what we've gone through already with the sneak attack, that alone makes him, I gotta say it's great, don't I? Makes him an A tier. So he's the first fairly strong unit in here. I will say though, for this tier list, it seemed like, so at this point in the history of HeroScape, they got the balancing of points a little bit better than they did with the early expansions, so you don't have as many D and S tier units here. In fact, we might not have any, we'll see. Third unit here is the Deepwyrm Drow. The Deepwyrm Drow are poison weapon types where sometimes when they attack you, it does extra damage. It's like a Warhammer-y kind of a thing to do. And they also have the hide in darkness similar to Darrak Ambershard. The Deepwyrm Drow are interesting too because they were a common squad, part of the master set, which means that if you want multiple Deepwyrm Drow squads, which you can have because they're a common squad, you either need to buy multiple master sets, which is going to give you a bunch of duplicate uniques, a lot of units that you don't really need for your collection, or you go buy them on eBay. The Deepwyrm Drow are a C tier, especially if you're only able to roll out 3 of them. They're not that effective, but they're definitely C tier and on the lower end of it. Next character is Erevan Sunshadow. You notice that the good guys here, it's very clear, like putting together a D&D team where you got, this is a half-elf, the half-elf is Brandis Skynhunter. I got that wrong. Erevan Sunshadow is a wizard. Erevan Sunshadow has one of the more fun attacks in the game. You can choose to attack with either 2, 3, or 4 dice. And if you roll all skulls, you can roll again, which is very interesting. You don't get to do the repeat attacks too much, but it's a fun upside unit. It's kind of like, playing with Nigorxa from the master set, where 1 out of 20 times you get to take control of the opponent's figure. Doesn't happen much, but in games like this, that's pretty fun. Erevan Sunshadow is B tier. Maybe your opponent, if they're not good at probabilities, are overestimating how likely it is he gets multiple attacks, so they are more protective about him than they need to be. Next we have the Feral Troll.
You've got to get rid of those Furbies. They've turned feral.
Interesting mix of enemies in this set. You have the Drow that we talked about before, another type of classic, dungeon crawler enemy, which is a troll. Feral Troll is actually similar to Krug, or Krug. We call him Krug. Like Krug, Feral Troll, as he takes damage, gets a stronger attack. He's not as extreme as Krug. Krug, no matter how much damage he gets more attack and he has double attack. Feral Troll is capped out here. Once you take 3 damage, your attack can't get any stronger, and he only does it once. But he heals 1 every turn. And he actually has a really weak defense. If you've maxed out your attack, you can play with him a little bit. So if he has 3 damage, that's optimum Feral Troll time. If you're down to like 2 lives left, maybe start moving him to another area so he can be healed before he starts attacking other characters and hope he doesn't get taken out on the way. It's an interesting unit to play with. Feral Troll is a B tier. He's also, I'll add, an uncommon hero, and this may have been the first instance of uncommon units in HeroScape. The difference between uncommon units versus unique and common units is uncommon units need to have an individual army card for every instance of the unit. So if you want to have 2 Feral Trolls, you can do that, but they need to have separate army cards. You have to kind of keep track of which ones are which is a little bit of a knock against it compared to, say, being a common hero like Dumutef Guard. You can't say just I activate all my Feral Trolls and you pick which one. If you're dealing with common heroes, that's what you get to do. Dumutef Guard, one of the more over-sculpted units for, overly imposing units for its points cost. All right, 3 units left. Next we have Othkurik the Black Dragon. This is the little young dragon. It says on the card, it's young and it's tricky. Othkurik the Black Dragon is similar in some ways to Mimring from the core set. It's 10 points cheaper. Instead of a humidifier's ready to empty its can. I could hear beeping. I don't know if you could hear that. Othkurik is you attack an enemy and then attack 2 more enemies next to it. Whereas Mimring, you attack 8 in a line somewhere on coming off of Mimring. I actually like Othkurik's attack just as much, if not more, than Mimring's attack, because it's relatively easy to avoid Mimring's fireline attack and getting lined up to get like 3 or 4 enemies taken out at once. I like units that are forcing your opponent to change how they play to avoid special attack. I think that's an underrated thing. As a result, I think Mimring actually gets some points for that. As a comparison point, it's much more common you're going to find 3 units touching each other as opposed to, say, a bunch in a line. So you're able to get 3 attacks in almost as often as you would Mimring. That alone, I think, is worth 140 points. But Othkurik also has a nice little bonus if he's lurching out of, shadow spaces. He gets extra movement and gets up to 7 attack for his normal attack. Because of that, Othkurik's an A tier. It's not an S tier, but he's very good. He's an A tier unit. I don't like, again, terrain-specific abilities unless it's gravy on top. Like, Othkurik was already worth 140 in my opinion before you got that. It's the same defense as Mimring too. So Othkurik is an A tier. Next is Pelloth. He is the leader of the Drow, so an Arachnomancer. I don't know if that ever came into play. What Pelloth does is, from afar, or at least a little bit afar, from 5 spaces away, he can turn one of the Deepwyrm Drow into like a relay, like an electrical relay, where he attacks from it and can take out units with indefensible attacks through it, and then blows up, that poor Drow that you're utilizing just to, funnel an attack through him. Sometimes you'll use up one of your units though and only get 1 skull out there. I mentioned before how the Deepwyrm Drow are a common squad, but they come in the master set. It's kind of a problem if you're using up a lot of your Deepwyrm Drow and you only start with 3. You can't remember ever actually pulling off, in a normal HeroScape game, pulling off Loth's special attack with him. Pelloth is a D tier. So there you have it. You got at least 1 extreme rating here. You got 1 D tier unit as part of the Battle for the Underdark master set. And the last hero, Tandros Kreel. Tandros Kreel is a fighter.
Why can't you change your thinking? Everybody else does.
Because I'm a fighter.
Tandros Kreel has 3 abilities. 1, he gets stronger attacks against adjacent figures. 2, he can attack in some ways 2 figures at once. Like basically swing around, get 1 guy, and then get 1 damage on another enemy next to him. And 3rd, if Tandros Kreel is engaged with an enemy figure, they have to attack Tandros Kreel. I really like Tandros Kreel because, like I mentioned before with Mimring, I like characters that are going to force your opponent to try and manage around them. So if your opponent doesn't want to attack Tandros Kreel, who has solid defense, 4 defense and 7 life, then they're going to try to avoid engaging them, and that's going to narrow the number of options that your opponent has. It's a good tactical unit for that reason. Tandros Kreel is an A tier. Clearly an A tier unit. I do wish he were a gladiator. That would maybe bump him up into the S tier. And that's your tier list for the Battle for the Underdark Master Set for HeroScape. If you like tier lists like this, so be sure to subscribe to Jackson Warfield's Game Room, and eventually we'll be digging into this guy. Yeah, that'll be cool. By the way, Zenith Rex is really large. That figure. Look forward to that. This is Jackson Warfield's Game Room, and I'll see you in the next one.